the Serbian Norbert Fager, arrived in Spain by bicycle from Italy in September 2017. He crossed France, was in Valencia, and then stopped in Andorra. But the man was no traveler. Throughout his journey, he killed innocent people who crossed his path in cold blood. Norbert became known for one of the 23 false identities that he has used throughout his criminal career, and that have misled more than one authority in the countries he has visited. This was Igor the Russian. Accordingly, their murders increased. The man grew increasingly violent, cultivating an image of a ruthless being that no one could stop. He seemed unstoppable until he was finally captured. But neither the bars nor the constant security of the prison could stop such a brutal being, laden with abilities from a rather strange past, which was what Igor the Russian did. And because no prison wanted him as a prisoner, Norbert Fayer was born in 1981 in the town of Subotica, in the autonomous province of Vojvodina in Serbia, which was then Yugoslavia. Son of Jean and Susana, the family belongs to a minority of Hungarian origin within Serbia. Years later, as he revealed to his fellow prisoners, Norbert served in the Russian army during the First Chechen War. As a member of the special units at the time, while in Russia, his daughter was allegedly murdered in retaliation against him. After this tragedy, he deserted the Russian army and moved to China, where he learned the language perfectly. Norbert had a knack for languages. He also knew Italian, Serbo-Croatian, Hungarian, Romanian, Russian, and some Spanish. The ex-soldier, he made the few he accepted into his tight circle of friends believe he was an elite commando trained in Russia. He explained to some that he had been born in Siberia. Gradually, finding himself more comfortable in his new personality, he liked to cultivate the image of a hard-iron soldier, resistant, capable of carrying out long experiences of survival in the mountains, but apparently beyond the Serbian compulsory military service. It was all a story, and he had only lived in the forest for a few seasons. Until that moment, he seemed to be a disturbed person who liked to make up stories about his past. But everything got complicated when he began to be wanted by the Serbian police for theft and abuse, and after being hidden for a long time and avoiding the law. In 2006, he fled to Italy. The creation of his character was perfect for evading the police and avoiding being arrested. But the plan wasn't going to work out the way he thought. In his new life in Italy, Norbert disguised himself grotesquely, like a kind of ninja with a ribbon in his hair, a knife attached to one of his ankles, and hiding the vegetation of the towns. But the supposed escape lasted only 1 year. In 2007, despite his ability to radically change his appearance, he was arrested by Italian authorities for a series of robberies between Ferrara and Rovigo, characterized by the use of bladed weapons such as the bow and knife, earning him the nickname Ninja in the area. In Rovigo prison, he appeared before the Italian authorities under the false identity of Igor Baklavic, thus avoiding extradition to his country of origin. As it was not such a serious case, he was finally released in 2010, not knowing that they were unleashing an unstoppable monster that would terrorize more than one country, as he had already demonstrated in the past with his modus operandi. It didn't take long to break the law, and not only that, but he was also dedicated to the activity of gigolo. After 1 year of freedom, on November 4, 2011, the chief prosecutor of Ferrara signed an expulsion order, but since he did not have identification, and not having been recognized by Russia, of which he had said he was a citizen, he remained in Argonne prison until his release in 2015. Once again, the ninja had been released, and on April 1, 2017, he continued his robberies. The first was in a business in the town of Ricardina, in Bologna, where the owner, David Damerfabri, 52, defended himself by taking the weapon out of his hands, but the subject, he reacted in the worst way. He shot him twice in the chest with a second weapon, a Smith & Wesson 9mm semi-automatic pistol that he had stolen from a security guard a month ago. Unfortunately, the man could not save himself from the accurate shots and died instantly. In his flight, he continued to take lives. Norbert murdered a waiter named David Fabri without any remorse. After his double murder, he hid in marshy terrain in the Ferrar area, where he continued killing. On April 8, 2017, he murdered forest ranger Valerio Berri and seriously injured another. The Italian police knew at that moment that they were dealing with a man who, if he was not arrested as soon as possible, would continue to leave a trail of bodies in his path. That's why they didn't waste any more time, and they put 150 men per shift, belonging to special teams equipped with infrared night vision goggles, thermal sights, and sniffer dogs to find the subject throughout the rural area and surrounding areas. But to the dismay of the authorities, even with all the equipment they could catch him. The Italian police could not understand how a single man had outwitted a team of more than 100 specialized men. They believed he was probably helped to escape by friends and former accomplices. It was then that word began to spread, that a fugitive ninja was unstoppable even to the authorities. People felt helpless, and wondered who could protect them from evil incarnate in a person. Veger believed Igor because of the need to flee Italian justice with which he had pending the payment of several lives. It was not difficult to confuse the authorities by creating a double identity. His strategy was certainly useful, since he ended up being registered with various Italian bodies, linked to the administration of justice under the name of Igor Baklabik, and not that of Norbert Fier. With time in his favor, the now called Igor got on a bicycle and pedaled hundreds of kilometers to Spain. On 17th May 2017, Igor sent a postcard to the Central Command of the Carabineros of Ferrara, in which he announced that he was leaving Italy and that he had arrived in Spain. According to Spanish police reports, he had crossed 8 countries using 18 different identities, mocking the authorities more than once. For this Serbian by birth, Spain was not an unknown territory. He had lived in 2015 in the Valencian community, where he had contacts. However, this time, he hid in the unpopulated area under Aragon. Months later, residents began to notice that their quiet town was no longer so quiet. The first alarms went off on November 18th, since constant thefts were occurring in rural houses. As of December 5th, a dozen abductions were reported. No one had any idea that a dangerous man, that he was being sought by 2 countries, he was hiding in the bushes. Things got worse when 2 people almost perished. The owner of a small hotel and a locksmith were shot from inside it when they were going to change a lock that was forced. Both were badly wounded by a Smith & Wesson gun that always accompanied the fugitive. The townspeople realized there was an individual who not only stole, but shot with very good accuracy. They quickly notified the authorities and the alarm spread throughout the area. But unfortunately, the government delegation in Aragon and the command of the Civil Guard of Teruel did not give much importance to the evident risk implied by this subject. So just 9 days later, Igor attacked again, this time fatally, 2 young civil guards. They were killed on the spot when they had the misfortune to cross paths with him. Because of this, the Spanish police finally took the capture of the criminal seriously. On his escape route, the police found cans of beer and also food he had stolen. These tests were important in determining that he was riding alone on a bike, dressed in camouflage and heading to Andorra. But there was nothing they could do to stop him from killing again. The fateful December 14, 2017 arrived. Eva, the wife of young rancher Jose Luis Iranzo, 40 years old, spoke with her husband about the shortcomings of the operation against the subject. It was at that moment that Luis knew that he could not stand idly by and joined 6 armed institute agents who were following the suspect's footsteps. The man assumed the role of guide and took the agents to nearby caves, but they did not find him there, so Iranzo decided to return to his estate with his wife. He had no idea the attacker would be there waiting for him. He didn't have time to react when he received 2 shots. One pierced his heart and ended his life on the spot. Jose Luis's father happened to be there. When he heard the shots, he thought his dog had been killed. It was actually his son who was lying on the floor. Without wasting time, he hid among a mound of straw and dialed the number of the civil guard from his hiding place. He saw his son's car pass in front of his eyes at great speed. He had no idea that Igor the Russian, his killer, was behind the wheel. Subject escaped onto Highway A-223, and after 1 kilometer, he crossed another vehicle. It was that of agents Romero and Caballero, aged 30 and 38, who would be the next victims of Igor. Caballero was the one who received the most shots, 7 in total. The first of them was in the back and buttocks, which caused a fracture in the pelvis that led him to immediately fall to the ground. Romero was shot 4 times, the first in the back. The bullets caused several fractures, including a very serious one in the right femur, that triggered significant bleeding. This precision in his actions was due to his paramilitary experience. Igor knew where to detonate to bring them down and finish them off. Both died from major massive hemorrhages, both internal and external. After the triple murder, an operation called the Cage began. To hunt down the criminal, Igor the Russian continued driving along Highway 226 until he had an accident at 2:25 a.m. on December 15th. The Civil Guard Operations Center in Castellon announced that they had found an overturned car. 20 minutes later, 2 civil guards confirmed that it was Iranzo's Mitsubishi, his first victim that night, about 25 meters away. They found a military-colored backpack. And not only that, next to him was Igor the Russian, who, being focused on with a flashlight, raised his head with a look that worried the officers. This time he didn't try to attack them. He was semi-unconscious from the crash. Otherwise, things would have ended in the worst way. Officers arrested him and confiscated 4 firearms and more than 10 knives and machetes in this way. It ended the story of a serial killer, who forensic psychologists defined as a primary psychopath, who shows low levels of anxiety, so they have a high level of social mastery, according to specialists. Igor was not afraid of anything, or anyone. His pulse did not tremble as he fired. Liar, manipulative, showed no empathy for the pain of others. All this put the security of the state in check. And the relatives of the victims asked that the politicians responsible give explanations in court why they could not arrest him in time. The Spanish authorities had been badly stopped. They had only managed to arrest him thanks to the fact that Igor himself had overturned his car, despite the request for extradition from the Italian authorities. The Spanish authorities. They wanted to try him first for crimes committed in their territory. His defense at trial alleged that Norbert Fier, alias Igor, suffered from a type of war neurosis that made him believe he was acting in self-defense when he committed the attacks. A neurosis that he developed during his supposed paramilitary time, of which there seems to be no concrete evidence, and which, apparently, was born from the imagination of the accused, according to the prosecutor's office. Man does not suffer from any pathology or an altered perception of reality. He was in full mental faculties with the capacity for judgment. He knew perfectly the scope of his behavior. He fled justice and decided to attack because, as he himself said, obstacles had to be eliminated by ending 3 lives. The professionals who analyzed him rejected that he suffered from war neurosis with post-traumatic stress, which is what his lawyer alleged to release him from prison, and they have warned that he will not hesitate to use again any type of violence that is necessary to achieve the proposed objective. So it was a risk to society. In the 4th session of the trial for the triple case of Andorra, Igor declared before the popular jury that his Bible is more important than people's lives, and that when he listened to the guards' loaders, he took all the risks necessary to escape. He even said, to justify the murders, that death was inevitable. To the horrified expressions of those present, he declared that he was fast, that he knew human anatomy, and knew where to shoot to kill. Of course, he didn't want to answer, and even smiled when asked why Iranzo was shot in the heart, and the guards in areas that were not covered by the vests. Although he insisted that he did not know that they were agents, forensic results on the victims revealed that the man surprised the 2 guards by shooting them in the back, since the first shots hit them in the buttocks, although Fier assured that he confronted them after feeling threatened by the sound of the magazine. The rancher received 2 detonations, Romero 4 and Caballero up to 7, which left all 3 unable to resuscitate. Even if they had been shot at the doors of a hospital, they could not have survived, the forensic doctors pointed out at the trial against them. Finally, and after a long list of compelling evidence, Norbert Fager was sentenced on February 3, 2020, to a revisable life sentence. This means that, after 25 or 30 years in prison, the sentence can be reviewed. Igor El Ruso has been through 6 penitentiary centers. His era in Aragon, Lama in Pontevedra, Dueñas in Palencia and Estremera, and Valdemoro in Madrid, and finally, La Ribera in Huelva. Always in isolation modules, absolutely alone. The fact that he has been transferred from prison so many times is something common in this type of inmates who are considered a risk to prisons. It is transferred from time to time, precisely to avoid possible incidents, because if you stay in the same place for a long time, you could learn what the weaknesses of the establishment are, and also to prevent it from taking a worker by mistake. The authorities had ample reason to constantly transfer Igor, because he attacked several officials in the prisons of Dueñas and Estremera. In Dueños, he used an axe made of tiles, with which he attacked and injured 5 officials. In Estremera, he turned the tiles into 2 daggers with socks on the hilt, and made 1 out of a bone I keep from one of the meals. In addition, he covered the inside of his clothes with newspaper, making himself a kind of armor. In this incident, he attacked 8 officials in both attacks. He took advantage of previous exits to testify before the judge in both prisons and refused to leave the cell, forcing officials to enter for him to handcuff him. That's when he perpetrated the attacks. Igor has shown a deep hatred of authority. According to him, taking their lives gets him free, 2 years after their attacks. In July 2023, He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for these events and to pay compensation for the damages caused. But not only the subject was accused, but the institution itself. The superiors of the injured officers were aware that the inmate was extremely dangerous. They knew that the transfer would cause problems, and also that the protective equipment was insufficient. In fact, there were only 4 complete sets, and the helmets were not the right size for each worker. Furthermore, it did not provide officials with training to act in this type of situations of serious resistance. In short, all these mistakes. They were a delicate infraction on the part of the penitentiary center for not having put in all the necessary means to avoid what happened when they were aware of the danger of Igor 1 from the officials. It resulted in an elbow trauma, a knee contusion, and a rib contusion. Another with a trauma to the thumb of the hand. The third with a chest contusion, a fissure, and a contusion on a knee. Another with bruises and a broken finger, and the last with a cervical contusion. The Prisoner Workers Union raised its voice in the face of this incident. They were the ones who suffered the most attacks. They were not even appointed agents of the authority, and they did not wear the appropriate uniforms to be able to carry out the work due to all these negligence. Finally, the injured received a $48,800 each for better or worse. Igor's attacks served to bring to light the problems caused by prison employees, who are the ones who every day must show their face and body in front of people like Igor the Russian, who will have to spend many more years behind bars. Currently, Norbert Feger, alias Igor the Russian, or the Ninja, is imprisoned in Huelva, in solitary confinement due to his long history. For a long time, the models in which he stays have no tiles that he can tear off, and the meat for lunches and dinners is given completely boneless. The most feared criminal in prisons will spend the rest of his days deprived of his freedom, either in Spain, where he was sentenced to permanent reviewable prison, or in Italy, where he was sentenced to life in prison. Russian Higorel has left a trail of blood in his path in several countries, murderous like a lone wolf, easily mocking the authorities and not even deprived of his freedom, have been able to prevent him from continuing to do his things. Let's hope that now, with all the necessary measures, they can finally contain this monster.